Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this out there on the World Wide Web. This is Jeremy Geelan for SYS-CON TV here at 12th Cloud Expo. Cloud Expo, New York. Delighted to have Mike Donaldson with me, which means we're talking hosting with capitals. Explain those capitals to me.
All caps. You know, our company name was originally hosting.com,
Right.
which was a great name during the hosting era. We have moved on from hosting to managed cloud hosting. And we undertook a new branding campaign last year. We thought about changing our name because hosting.com definitely sounded a little bit too 90s, a little bit too pets.com, a little bit too low end, when in fact what we do is we build and operate high performance clouds for business critical applications. So we're actually pretty high end. So what we came down to was, yeah, the name hosting, at least it gets you in the right ballpark. And because really what it is now is it's managed cloud hosting. And lots of people do searches on Google that involve the word hosting. So having that in our domain name and having the domain name hosting.com is a huge attribute. However, to distinguish from sort of the generic industry term hosting, we go with all caps.
See, I've been itching to ask that. So it is a totally reasoned, planned move. Excellent, and you get the chance, everyone asks you, you get the chance to reposition the company. Clever.
There you go, that's right.
Let's talk about just that. How does one claw one's market share in this vast and growing market? But nonetheless, it's brutal, I'm thinking, and you guys are doing tremendously well. So what is it that you're doing differently?
So, you know, we have found that there's an issue in the market having to do with management models for infrastructure as a service. And we actually take a different model than what most of the better known companies are doing. So we found that just by explaining the sort of breadth of choices and realizing that different use cases are better for different sort of models, it really helps people understand what we do and why it's different and why in some cases it's better.
So, you know, you had this background, you wanted to go towards the cloud. You've jumped almost further than anyone I can think of in that direction. Who was the driver behind that? Is that a group within the company? Is that top down? How does that work?
So actually, our company was founded in 2008. And the founders, Art Zaley and Joel Daly, had been one of the early co-location providers. They started a co-location company called Inflow in the late 90s. And they eventually sold it to SunGard. They were ready to go public, but then, you know, Y2K happened. You know, the market crashed. They didn't go public. They wanted to sell out to SunGard. After they finished their non-compete period, their existing investors came back to them and said, why don't you start a new company to do the next generation of hosting and focus on the cloud? And at the same time, they were coming up with the same vision of seeing how cloud was going to happen and how it was going to fundamentally create the next architecture for computing. And the other thing they did that was a little bit different is the investors said, instead of building this organically, build it by acquisition. So that's what we've done. We've actually bought 3 web hosting, managed hosting companies, combined them together, added in the cloud capabilities. So we were actually one of the first managed hosting companies to add cloud, and we are also absolutely one of the first to add in the whole managed services layer. And to us, the managed services layer is the big piece that's missing from most of the cloud models that are out there. You know, most people, when they think cloud right now, they think infrastructure as a service, they naturally think Amazon, because Amazon has such a fantastic job with AWS, and they've kind of defined the market. Now, what people don't realize, though, is that the way they've defined the market, it's really a self-service model, where you have to provide your own expertise and your own labor to do all the work on the Amazon platform. Now, the Amazon platform itself is fairly magic. I mean, when you look at what it can do versus what people had to do 10 or 20 years ago, it's pretty shocking. However, it's not magic enough to be self-managing. And in fact, Gartner Group, earlier this year, felt the need to put out a statement that basically said, in all caps, and I'm paraphrasing here slightly, all infrastructure requires management. Why did they have to do that? Because they said people are under the mistaken impression that cloud infrastructure as a service largely manages itself. It, you know, things like backups and patching and disaster recovery, that would somehow all just happen. And the reality is it doesn't, at least not in those kinds of products. You have to do that all yourself. Now, there is a whole nother class of product that does all that stuff, And it also does lots and lots of other things, like potentially even running your SAP instance for you. And that's the kind of fully managed service that an IBM or an Accenture would do for you. And those guys, you don't have to provide any labor or any expertise. They will do it all for you. In fact, they will basically outsource your entire operation for you. And they'll bring in some recent, late cloud stuff too along the way where it fits into the architecture. But it's really a fully outsourcing model. It's very, very expensive. It's really designed for the Fortune 500. And you have to be willing to pretty much give up complete control over your operation to them. That's how they can make money, is because they take over control and they run things their way. So the problem we've seen is that there are people that they don't have the expertise to do self-service, and they don't have the money to do the fully managed, but they need something. So mid-market, a lot of mid-market IT organizations fall into this gap. They just don't have the resources to compete with the big guys. Marketing departments like me, putting up next-generation e-commerce and web-facing applications. There are great agencies that can build the most fantastic web portals now, but I'm not an IT guy. I don't know how to operate this stuff, so I need someone who can do that for me. Software companies also, who are either building out SaaS applications or taking their existing packaged products and hosting them for people. They like to focus their effort on product functionality, not on operating the product in a production environment. So all those kinds of use cases are a great model for what we call an empowered management model, where it's the kind of tools and infrastructure you see at an Amazon, but with managed services added on that do things like high availability configurations, disaster recovery configurations, security capabilities, and so forth.
This is brilliant. So Mike covered a lot of ground, but we can summarize it, can't we? Because that Gartner report, let's just take away from this interview that Gartner report in block capitals, as you say. All infrastructure requires management, and then we segue from the block capitals, of course, to hosting, which will solve the problem. Go to hosting.com and take him up on his invitation to start using them if all of that resonates with you, and I think that's going to be the case for a gazillion of people.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for watching along out there on the World Wide Web.